with Known So a Thing, it's very straightforward because it was something that really happened to myself and my sister when we were small. So we were on holidays in London with my family, and I was 12. And I was there with my mom and my dad and my three sisters. And we were in a tube station, and myself and my 6-year-old sister got on the tube, and the doors closed, and the train took off.
Hey peeps, welcome to the Literary Lounge where we have honest conversations with authors about life, literature, and spaces in between. The guest I have with me here today is joining us from Dublin, Ireland. Andrea Mara is a best-selling author of several crime thrillers, many of which have been shortlisted for Irish Crime Novel of the Year awards. Her most recent novel, No One Saw a Thing, which I have with me here, was a #1 bestseller in the UK, in Ireland, and on Kindle, and has sold over 150,000 copies, spending 5 months in the Irish top 10, which in itself is amazing. The best part is that we have an all new novel from her called Someone in the Attic to obsess over. Hasn't launched in India yet, but I'm really hoping for that book to launch soon. And today I'm going to be speaking to her on her two novels, No One Saw a Thing and Someone in the Attic. We'll discuss all things thrillers, explore her approach to crafting intricate plot lines, uncover the secrets behind her suspenseful narratives that captivate readers, and gain valuable insights into her creative process. So, first of all, thank you so much, Andrea, for agreeing to this interview, for being here, for talking to us about your process of writing thrillers and everything. Thank you so much for being here. How are you doing? And what have you been reading these days?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for asking me. It's lovely to get to do this, and it's always nice to just talk about books. What I am reading at the moment, I am on audiobook. I'm listening to a book by a US author called Lisa Gardner, who is new to me. And I was just kind of looking for fiction books that are set in kind of hiking trails or mountains or remote areas, as research for the book I'm working on for 2 years' time. And I happened across this author, and the book I'm reading is nothing to do with hiking trails or mountains or remote areas. It's set in Boston, but it's really, really good, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a missing persons story, and the main character, she's almost like a Lone Ranger or Jack Reacher style character. She doesn't really have a home. She goes from city to city trying to help find missing children, and of course, she has her own dark story, which has led her to choosing this way of life. So, yeah, that's really good. And in print, I'm reading an advanced proof copy of a book by an Irish author called Amy Jordan, who's also a friend of mine. And it's her book that's coming out in January. I think it's called The Dark Hours, and it's a police procedural set in Cork, where Amy is from in Ireland. And it is really, really, really good. So those are my two books that I have on the go at the moment.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you also manage to pick multiple books at a time?
Like I'd always have one to listen to and one to read. And I have a Kindle on the go at the moment as well, because I was away at a festival in the UK at the weekend, and I didn't have a print book with me. I brought my Kindle, and it was In the Blink of an Eye by Joe Callahan. So I've just started that, but I'm back to my print book now. So I'd usually have, I suppose, two or three on the go, but I don't think I'd have multiple print books on the go.
Okay, makes sense. I generally have like three or four books that I read at one point in time. Uh, most of them are paperbacks because I'm still trying to get familiar with Kindle. But yes, but I try to keep all of these in very different genres so that I don't mix timelines, I don't mix storylines of all of these three books. But yes, very interesting. And okay, so your book, Someone in the Attic, just got launched and it's out in the market. I'm pretty sure that you'd be busy with, book launches and signings and, everything that goes on with that. Are you enjoying the process? Has your schedule gotten busier with all of that?
I really enjoy it. And I know some authors find publication time difficult because, well, first of all, it's nerve-wracking because you're always worried, what if people don't like this book? But also, it is a lot of um, yeah, events, signings, going into bookshops, chatting to people, and it can be tiring, but I really like that part of it because I spend so much time here. This is my home office, just on my own at my laptop. So I really, really like to get out of the house and get into bookshops and go to events and see other authors and meet readers and meet booksellers. So I've been really, really enjoying the last few weeks publicizing Someone in the Attic. But it's been out a few weeks, maybe 6 weeks now in Ireland and the UK. So I'm kind of back to just normal life now of, yeah, doing my edits.
Okay, wow. So you've already started working on another novel, or are you still back to something else?
So the book that will come out next year, called It Should Have Been You, that's at the editing stage. So it's at structural edit stage, which is where my editors have sent notes saying, if you could look again at this character and just make sure we're clear on his motivation. Have a look on the early chapters to see if we can add some tension. So the sort of high level notes.
Mhm.
And there are some line edits in it as well, which is where I'm in the manuscript and they've highlighted certain lines and said, I don't think this is clear enough. Can you make that a little more clear, or can you tighten this up? It's more than we need, or, repetition, you've already made that point earlier, that kind of thing. So it's definitely an easier round of edits than the first structural edits, which is the first response where that you're opening that email and you don't know if they're going to say something like, no, this doesn't work, you're going to have to change, you're going to have to rewrite everything. So that's really, really scary. And most authors I know, we all do the same thing. You open your email for your first round of structural edits, you read it and you just go, God, and you just put your head in your hands and you think, I can't do this. No, no, it's too much. They're asking me to change so many things. I can't do it. This is crazy. And why are they making me change the ending or whatever it might be? And you close your laptop and you walk away. Everybody does this. And then maybe a day later, a few hours later, a few days later, you come back and you look again and you go, okay, I still hate this, but they're right. They're right about all the things. And I do have to do this work. And then when you break it down into, I would break it into numbered bullet points. So you might have a 10-page um editorial letter from your editors, and then I just want to take out all the points and turn them into like points 1 to 30 or whatever it might be of what I need to do, and then just start working my way through point by point, because that's all you can do. And then you get to the end and you go, yeah, they were right, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And yeah, then you do it all again with the next book next year. So it's grueling, to be honest, but it's worth it then to get the book to the best place it can be.
That is so cool. Is there any particular ending that you remember changing that you wouldn't have wanted?
No, that probably wasn't the best example I gave. I don't think I've ever had to change an ending, um, thankfully. And even with this book just now that I'm talking about, It Should Have Been You. At first, when I was like, oh my gosh, they want me to change so much. And then when I took another look, I realized, but they were all about, yeah, developing a particular character more. And there was no, like, sometimes, and it hasn't happened to me, thank goodness, it could literally be this story does not work. Can you completely change the second half of the book, which is huge, but that is something that can happen. So far, thankfully, the changes have all been things that made sense to me and were not maybe as big work as I thought they were. But yeah, like changing the ending would be really hard. I don't mind changing the ending if I'm choosing to change the ending, and I often I will know the ending when I start writing, because I have to know the ending before I start writing the first chapter. But it may be that I'll change the ending, I'll change my idea about what that ending might be as I'm going through the first draft, and that's okay. But I don't want someone else to tell me I have to change the ending.
That makes sense. I mean, of course, the book that ends up coming out is your baby,
Yeah,
and you have thought about it ever since you started working on it. So, of course, that
yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah,
Okay, I always wondered what goes on in the minds of thriller writers, especially when they're working on their novels. And now that you've worked on so many of them, I would love to know what your thought process was when you were especially working on No One Saw a Thing. And then I would also come on to Someone in the Attic. and of course the next book that you're working on. Where does the inspiration come from?
So with No One So a Thing, it's very straightforward because it was something that really happened to myself and my sister when we were small. So we were on holidays in London with my family, and I was 12. And I was there with my mom and my dad and my three sisters. And we were in a tube station, and myself and my 6-year-old sister got on the tube, and the doors closed and the train took off. So I don't really remember a whole lot about it, even though I was 12. And what I know of it is more about the retelling of the story over and over. That's what's crystallized it for me. But apparently, a person beside us on the train said, your dad was shouting through the window saying Tower Bridge, Tower Bridge. So that's a tube station. You need to get off at Tower Bridge. And when we reached Tower Bridge, this person told us, this is your stop. You need to get off here and wait for your parents. So we did. And my parents turned up there, I guess, a few minutes later, and everything was fine. But it's only in the last few years hearing my dad tell the story again, and now I have kids myself, that I'm thinking, oh my God, if I was in London and one of my kids or two of my kids got on the tube and the tube doors closed, I can't even begin to imagine how terrifying it must have been for my parents. So that was the idea then, that made me think, yeah, actually, that could work for a thriller, to have this tube doors story happen. But I thought, we were 12 and 6, so we were able to explain. As a 12-year-old, I could tell people what my name was, and if a police officer had come to speak to us, I was going to be able to explain what my parents' names were, etc. Now, it was before mobile phone times, but I was old enough, I think, that I was always going to be able to speak to someone official. So I thought the characters, if they were younger, it would be more terrifying. So that's why I decided that Faye and Bia should be 6 and 2. And I quite liked the idea that Bia, as a 2-year-old, I was kind of fascinated almost with the idea that Bia would have seen what happened, but she's too small to be able to tell anybody. So I was quite interested in that idea that, babies and toddlers can be a witness to something, but have absolutely no way to explain what happened. So that's where all of that came from.
That is horrifying and scary, honestly, and also amazing how the story turned out. Especially in say in Bia's case, when we see Bia, when we learn that Bia saw everything that happened, and towards the end, how everything ties up. It's beautifully explored. I mean, I love that scene particularly when Bia recognizes something, and then it's like, okay, this is what is happening. And yeah, so that's one part I love, but. Wow. The story came from a real life experience. That is amazing. So do
Yeah.
you have do you like pick stories from such experiences, or do you like pick, I mean, where does your inspiration comes from generally for thrillers?
So far it's always been real life experiences. So another of my books, All Her Fault, I don't know if it's out in India, is about a mom who goes to collect her child from a play date. And when the door is answered, the person who answers the door is someone she doesn't know. It's not a mom from the school, and she's confused, and she's like, "Oh, I'm here to pick up Milo from the play date." And the person at the door is like, I don't know any Milo. There's no play date here. I don't have children. And so she realizes her son isn't there in the house, in the address she was sent. And, she's like, is this a fake play date? Has someone kidnapped my child? So that was also a real life inspiration, because I went to collect my daughter from a play date when she was 5. It was her first time in this particular house. And what we had done when they all started school is everybody in the class, all the parents had given their home addresses. So we had this list with every child's name, parents' email, parents' address. So when people were going on play dates, the idea would be that you just have this address list for birthday parties and play dates. And I had it in the glove compartment of the car, and I just went to the house and rang the bell, and there was no answer. And I looked in the door, looked in the window, and it looked like the house was empty, like nobody lived there. So my first thought was, oh my God, someone has kidnapped my child. And then somebody stuck their head out of the house next door and said, oh, nobody lives there. And I nearly collapsed. And then the neighbor said, they moved house a few weeks ago. They just live over there. So the people had moved house. I had my list of addresses. I hadn't texted them to ask their address because I was using the list. Everything was absolutely fine. But again, I thought, that could be a good plot for a story. And I remember chatting to my eldest daughter about it a year or two later and saying, I think that could work. And she was like, yeah, wouldn't it be even scarier if instead of no one answering the door, as is the real case, if somebody did answer the door, but they didn't know anything about the child? So that's how it ended up that way, because my daughter suggested to go down that route, which I think is, yeah, more effective. So everything is from real life. I mean, those two, no one saw a thing and all her fault, are sort of bigger dramatic events that happened. Some things are very small, like someone in the attic. I was sitting here in this office and I was on my own in the house, and I heard a thump from the attic and I thought, oh my God, there's someone in the attic. And then I kind of thought, of course there is not someone in the attic. That's crazy. But it was enough to make me think, yeah, but what if, when you're small and you're scared and you think there's someone under the bed or there's someone inside the wardrobe, and then you're an adult and you're like, of course there is nobody under the bed, there's nobody in the wardrobe. So I thought, but what if there really was someone in the attic? So everybody thinks these childhood fears are irrational, but what if they're not irrational? So that's where that came from.
That's exactly what my thought was when I was reading the premise for Someone in the Attic, that it seems to bring out my innermost, my darkest, deepest fears about, you know, I still have this fear. I cannot sleep with lights closed in a room where I'm all alone. I have to have either somebody with me in the room or I'll keep the lights open. So I think we all have those kinds of fears. I mean, not as adults, but in when we're children, we have those fears. And when I read the premise, I was like, okay, this is picking on my most innermost darkest fears. So um, that's crazy. I mean, that's a crazy story that all of these thrillers are coming from either real life experiences or things that we think about it and then we forget. Like this thought, right? And sometimes it happens in the middle of the night. You're up late, 3 a.m. in the night or 4 a.m. in the night, and something ticks, and you're like, okay, there's somebody, but of course there's nobody.
Yeah.
And so things like that happen. But wow, that is brilliant. I mean, kudos to you for thinking about an entire novel based on such circumstances, and then it becomes a bestseller. Wow, how do you feel about it? I mean, when you pen down these thoughts, and when it turns into a bestseller.
Like it's amazing because you never know when any book comes out, you don't know if it's going to work. And I mean, you hope because your editor has done so much work on it and I trust my editors, I trust my publishers, but you still don't know how readers are going to respond. So if it works, it feels absolutely amazing every time.
So, does it ever happen that you have the outline in mind, but you don't know, you get stuck in the middle of a book, wondering what would happen in the end, or where this character particularly would go?
So I would always know the end because I have a big fear of starting writing a book and getting to the end and not knowing how to end it. Like and I suppose we've all probably seen TV shows or films or read books where there's an amazing premise and you think this is going to be great, but you get to the end and you realize they didn't have an ending. They only had a premise and they're trying to kind of skew some kind of an ending in that doesn't really work. So I never want to do that. I want to make sure that I have a premise, but I have an ending and that I hope it will be satisfying and a good ending for the reader's experience. So I will always know the ending, but absolutely as I'm going through. So I mean, I'll have an outline, but that's a very high level outline. It might be 4 pages of a Word doc. So it doesn't tell you what's going to happen on chapter 32 or what's going to happen, at any given point in the book. So yeah, there's times when I'm sitting looking at my laptop going, okay, what happens next? But my solution for that, for me personally, is to plot out the next chapters by hand with a pen and notebook so that I'm not facing the blank Word doc page on a laptop. Because when I face that blank page, I tend to write rubbish because I'm just I'm like, okay, it's writing time. I need to write something, but I don't know what's going to happen. So I'll just write something. And then might not want to delete it because I've spent time writing it. Whereas if I have my pen and paper, I can just kind of brainstorm to myself, scribble some notes until I get to the right answer. And I'll know the right answer when I see it. And I'll think, okay, that's what happens in chapter 35. And then I go type it up on the laptop. So that works much better for me than just trying to do it straight on the laptop.
That makes actually a lot more sense than writing a book chapter wise, because even I've been speaking to authors this whole while, and they've said something similar, that it's very difficult to pen down a story from the beginning to the end, knowing every chapter where it fits. But sometimes you might think of the middle and then write that first, and then move towards the end.
Hmm.
Wow. And okay, so I read No One Saw a Thing in a couple of days. It was beautifully narrated with complex characters, and it kept me hooked till the very end. So, but one thing that particularly stood out for me from the book was that everybody was in the spotlight. You could blame anybody for the incident. And it was amazing how well defined everybody's backstory was as well, because once you are blaming a particular character, you then get into their backstory and you're like, okay, they might be equally responsible for a crime like this, right? So, what was your thought process when you're working on all of these characters, and how difficult or easy was it for you to frame all of these characters?
Well, for me, when I'm reading a book or watching a TV show, I want a big cast where anybody could be the suspect. And I don't really want to guess the answer, but I want to wonder. I want to enjoy looking at it and thinking, so it could be that guy because a clue has led me to think that. Or, ooh, I think it could be that person. A bit like when you're reading an Agatha Christie and she would always have that her cast, any of whom could be guilty. So that's something I really enjoy doing, and I really like to drop clues and red herrings and little tiny breadcrumbs that the very eagle-eyed reader will say, aha, did you see the book that was on that character's shelf? I think if they're reading that book about serial killers, maybe they're a serial killer or whatever the case may be. And then maybe it's true or maybe it's not true. So that's something as a writer and a reader that I really, really enjoy. So that's really my favorite thing to do, is to make every single character a suspect potentially. Some with almost like a big sign over them saying, okay, this is your big red herring, and some in a much quieter way. And one of the things I learned from my first editor with my publisher, she said to me, every character has to earn their place on the page. So I had one particular character who only existed to be a good person, to sort of, among all these, this was for all her fault, among all the difficult, troubling, unlikable, potentially guilty characters, I had this one character who was just a good person. And my editor said, no, 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 that character needs to earn their place on the page. So can you add something in so that that person might also be a suspect for some readers? And I kind of resisted inside my head. I didn't say it to my editor because I was new to this publisher and trying to be very well behaved. And I was like, really? Do I have to make this character a suspect? And in the end, I did something and it worked. And people would still message me. I'm not going to say the character name because it will be a spoiler if someone was to read the book. I'm just going to call the character Catherine because there's no Catherine in the book. So people would say, at one point, I even suspected Catherine, and I was like, okay, my editor was right. That was the right thing to do. So that's something I try to do and really enjoy doing.
Wow, that's an amazing thing, especially a journey with the whole, putting suspects everywhere in every person. That's amazing. I would like to read that book. Which book are we talking about here?
So that book is All Her Fault. I'll show you because I have it here. So that's that one.
Okay. This was your
And
first novel?
uh, sorry, say that again.
I'm just asking, was this your first novel?
So this was my first one with my current publisher. I was with a smaller Irish publisher for my first three books, and then I moved to Transworld, who are Penguin, and this one was my first one with Penguin.
Okay.
And then I have the next one with Penguin is this one, Hide and Seek, and then after that came No One Saw a Thing. and then someone in the attic. So I don't know which ones are out in India. Actually, I think All Her Fault might be out in India because somebody, a bookshop, tagged me at one point and they had All Her Fault in the reel. So I think it must be out there. Yeah.
I'll check it out. I'll check that book out then. Yeah. I am so intrigued, especially knowing that it's coming. It's also is coming from a real life inspiring story. I would love to read the book and see what the book has in store for me.
And then you can see that you'll know the character I'm talking about that I've just referred to as Catherine. And when you get to the end, you'll be like, aha, I know who she means now when she said Catherine.
I'm gonna text you after that.
Okay, cool.
Wow. So, okay, now we've been talking about the whole writing process and everything. So, what is the most challenging aspect of writing thrillers? I'm sure it wouldn't be as easy and simple as we're talking about right now, because every book writing process involves a lot of work, a lot of research and everything. So, what is that one thing that you absolutely hate or despise when writing thrillers?
I think it's a tie between writing the first draft, which is really hard work, and doing that first round of structural edits that I was talking about earlier, where your editors say, oh, you're going to have to change this, and this. I find those two things really difficult. And like the first draft, like a lot of authors say, oh, I love the first draft because you're free to write anything you want. And I'm like, yeah, but it's really hard work to sit down every day and go, okay, I can do this. So I think it's maybe a bit like a marathon. I've never run a marathon, but I imagine that it's one of those things that, people run a marathon, they find it difficult to do while they're running, but euphoric also, especially when they get to the end. And then they go, oh my God, I'm so glad that's done. I don't know if I could ever do that again. And then they go sign up for the next marathon again. So I think maybe writing books is a bit like that. You know that it's hard work, but you have to get to it. So yeah, those are the two things that I find the most difficult. And everything else is nicer and better than that.
Okay, and what is that one thing that puts your thrillers apart from all the other thrillers that you might have read before?
Like I always find that a difficult one to ask because I answer because I think there's so many amazing thrillers out there, and I always feel like I've been really really lucky. Like I've been lucky with my agent. I've been so lucky that she found my publisher. So it's a big publisher, so it gets my books out to into the hands of readers all over the place. So I do feel very very lucky. What I try to do, what I'm aiming with each book I write is that I want to have a mystery and I want it to be a page turner. I want it to have pace. I want the reader to wonder what's happening, but I also really want the reader to care about some of the characters and to root for some of the characters. And I want it to have heart. So, I mean, I really enjoy reading a thriller that is, kind of very dark, maybe a bit tongue in cheek, and it's for pure entertainment. And, I'm not necessarily going to care about the characters or cry for those characters. And I can really enjoy that as a reader. But as a writer, I want the heart as well. So I want the two things, the mystery and the page turning, but also I want you to like my characters. So that's what I'm aiming for. Yeah, I have a little like a thing that I keep here on my desk, which is a little list of what I'm trying to do, like that I want to have twists, I want to have likable characters, I want to have relatable stories, warmth, and also short chapters and cliffhangers. I like to do that.
Yeah, I noticed that the chapters were short and every chapter ended on a cliffhanger that you cannot just keep the book aside. You have to read the next chapter and sometimes even the next chapter, because what was happening in this book especially was they were alternating timelines. So you would read about one point here and then you would move back 3 days ago and then you will have to like finish that chapter first to move on to the next chapter for all of it to make sense. Sometimes I wanted to skip this next chapter so that I could read the next one and see what exactly happened. But I absolutely get that, and I think I correlate with it now because when I was reading this book particularly, I rarely find it in suspense books that when you're writing a thriller. I mean, I've read a lot of thrillers, but it's very difficult to like a character when you're writing a thriller. I mean, when you're reading a thriller, especially. And this, I think, I found in No One Saw a Thing, that the characters have had depth, a lot of depth. You could explore them in detail, and you could also like a character basis something, some character arc or something about them that makes you like the character. So of course that's wonderful. And now that we're talking about No One Saw a Thing, I also want to talk about alternating timelines. Was that a difficult process to carve out, make sense of one thing at one point in time and then write the next chapter that has a very different route, and you're going 3 days or maybe 4 days or maybe 10 days back in time, writing about what happened back then. So how difficult was that process?
I really enjoy doing that. And what I do is I keep a spreadsheet and I track all my chapters on the spreadsheet. So I can look at that to see, am I in the present or am I 3 days earlier, 2 days earlier, 1 day earlier? And I'll have a column in it called What the Reader Knows. So I'll keep note of what information has been given to the reader already. So I want to make sure if I'm in the 2 days earlier chapter, I don't accidentally put something in there that, the reader shouldn't know yet, or that only happened in the present, or whatever the case may be. So it's a good way of keeping track of everything. And I just found in this book in particular, I realized pretty quickly that it would be too much to spend the entire book in the present with Sive desperately looking for her child. I think it would be, I know as a reader, I need a break. Or like when I'm watching a movie and it's been scary nighttime scene, I'm like, give me a daytime scene. I need daylight now. I need a breather from the tension.
Yeah.
So I figured that's probably what other readers would want too. They'd want a break from the tension. And also, I think it could get repetitive if it was an entire book of Sive going, "Where's my child? Where's my child?" So I was like, okay, we need to do something else here. But also, as we've been discussing, every character is a suspect. So I needed the reader to have a chance to get to know all of the characters and to get to see Sive and her husband Aaron when they're not panicking, because you're not seeing the real person when their child is missing. You're just seeing the panicked version. So I realized very quickly, if I went back 3 days, we'd get to meet Sive and Aaron as they are when they're just being themselves. And we'd also get to meet all of Aaron's friends in London that they're meeting up with that weekend, all of whom are in the story. And we needed to get to know them. So the timeline thing was really, I realized very quickly, necessary to the book.
Yeah, I mean, it all does make sense in the end because you get to know the characters much, much better instead of, just going in the current timeline and seeing all of them panicking.
Yeah.
And okay, now the next question that I have for you is a little different from the book and not about either of the books that we're talking about here today. It's a little bit more personal. I want to ask, does writing eerie novels like No One Saw a Thing, Cell in the Attic, and things like that are dripping with suspense have any impact on your personal life? And if yes, then how do you manage to keep your writings and personal life separate?
So I think it does have an impact, but in a good way. So I find, particularly since having my kids, I worry all the time about things that might happen to them. And a way to channel those worries for me is to put them in the book. So worrying that they're going to go missing during a game of hide and seek, write a book called Hide and Seek about a child who goes missing during a game of hide and seek. Because when you write fiction, you can choose the ending and you can choose to make it a happy ending and you can get closure. So it's been a really useful way for me to get my worries out of my head and onto the laptop and into a book on the bookshelf. And so that's the positive impact it's had. I don't think there's any negative impact. Like sometimes, my kids will laugh. Like I'd be walking to school with my son, we'd be chatting about plot ideas. He comes up with stories for games that he likes to create and animations that he likes to create. So we swap stories over and back. And if he says something like, and then the character in the game is going to die, and I'm like, no, you can't have no. And he's like, Mom, you write books about murder. And I'm like, I know, but that's different. Can't you make a nice game where no one has to die? So like, I suppose we kind of laugh a little sometimes about the fact that my job is writing books about murderers and kidnappers. But the only way it seeps into real life is in a positive way, I think, so far.
Wow, that's interesting. So, I've also noticed when I was researching about your books that a lot of your books are on missing children. So, has that been a fear of yours ever since, I mean, you had kids, or has a personal experience inspired all of those?
Yeah, like it is a thing. I mean, I think a lot of parents could relate to that. Like there is just that thing. You're in the playground with your kids and you know there's a gate and that the gate is closed and they have to be somewhere in here. But suddenly you can't see your 2-year-old anymore and you're looking all around and there's a rational part of your brain going, no, he's in here. He cannot have left. The gate is locked. But another part of your brain is like, but I can't see him. I need to see him. Or like being at a swimming pool, in a water park, in a theme park, all those crowded places where children can just like disappear just for a minute, but it's enough to cause panic. And every single parent I know has had some experience of losing sight of a child in a supermarket or a playground. And that kind of, you're trying to stay calm and you're like, of course it's okay, but you're still like worried until you see them again. So yeah, the first 3 books I did with Penguin all feature missing children. So for the fourth one, Someone in the Attic with Penguin, I was like, okay, we cannot, no more missing children for a few years because it wasn't intentional. Like All Her Fault, as I was saying, was based on a real play date situation. I really wanted to write that story. And then Hide and Seek was also based on my son going missing during a game of hide and seek. And then No One Saw a Thing, as I've explained, was also based on a real life story. And to be honest, I hadn't even, to me, that was a story about two doors closing. That was the genesis of that story. And it was only when after my editor had said, yeah, go for it. We like that idea. You start writing that, green light, that I started to think, oh, wait, this is another missing child story. So I thought, okay, I'm going to keep going with this, but then the next few books we'll find different things that are not missing children. So yeah, it wasn't on purpose, but it of course is stemming from real life fears. Yeah.
Wow, it's so good to see that you are able to pen all of those fears in books and you're able to channel and process all your emotions in books and then these books turn into bestsellers. So that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's been good. My children have their early childhood going missing all the time has turned into something good for me.
Yeah. Okay, and another very curious question that I have is how do you figure out what you write on the back cover of the book? I mean, I'm sure when you finish the book, it would be a very difficult thing to figure out what should be here without giving any spoilers. How do you do that?
So my editor does that, which is really good because then I don't have to do it. But you're right, it's difficult. And so he sends an email to me and my agent about what he's proposing for the copy on the back of the book. And so one time or two times I've gone back to him and I said, oh, is that a spoiler? And he says that he thinks, as a good rule of thumb, anything that happens within the first third of the book is fair game for going on the copy at the back of the book. And I think that makes sense. Like you want enough that it will make the book sound interesting. If you can't give anything to the reader on the back of the book, that's difficult. But then lots of people don't read the back of the book either. I think especially Kindle readers tend to just buy the book. Like my sisters read on Kindle a lot and listen to audiobooks a lot, and they know they loved a particular book, but they can never remember the author name, the title, or what the blurb on the back of the book was, because you don't see the back of the book with the Kindle. So people are just like buying them because they're 99p.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've recently started Kindle and yeah, I'm hoping that the journey goes well. I'm still trying to adjust because the paperback addiction is a little too much for me at this point in time. It gets
Yeah.
very difficult for me to move to a digital copy of the book,
Mhm.
but I hope it goes well.
Yeah.
Um, okay. The other thing is that can you share with us something about Someone in the Attic without giving us spoilers, something that's not mentioned on the blurb of the book? And yeah, one particular thing that would make readers want to read the book.
Yeah, so Someone in the Attic is about Julia, and she moves from San Diego to Dublin with her 2 children and her ex-husband. And they are moving back for a reason which you don't find out for a little while, but they have their reasons to move back to Dublin to escape from something in San Diego. So they're living in a luxury gated complex in a very nice part of Dublin. And one day, the daughter, a teenage daughter, Isla, is looking at TikTok on her phone, and she sees a video that looks like it was filmed inside their house. So she's showing it to her mom, going, Mom, how is there a video from inside our house on TikTok, and it shows someone letting themselves out of the attic and creeping around the house when they're not there. So they're really shocked at this. How could this be done? Is it Photoshop? Is it AI? What is it? Or is there someone in the attic? And that's the crux of the story as Julia tries to work out, is there someone in the attic now? I mean, of course, I'm sure some people will be listening to that going, why would they not just check the attic? So they do check the attic and they see nothing there, but then the videos keep coming. So they're jumping all the time between thinking, of course there's no one in the attic, a bit like me the day I was here in my office and heard the noise from up there. That sense of, no, that's ridiculous. Of course there's no one in the attic, but then something else happens that they go, this is crazy. Is there someone in the attic? And that is what Julia has to figure out as she becomes increasingly scared in her own house.
Wow. My logical brain, or I'd say the illogical part of my brain, says that there's a ghost in the house. Maybe
Aha.
that's the reason why all of this is happening and you still can't see anybody. Do you ever
We'll
think of turning the book into a paranormal thing sometime?
No, I wouldn't, because I know readers who think they're reading a crime novel. If it's not clear that it's going to go paranormal, people can get very cross about that. So I enjoy I enjoy paranormal if I know what I'm getting, but I do understand if you think you're reading a straight crime novel from an author who always writes straight crime novels, and if there suddenly was something paranormal, I think that can be difficult for readers. So far I haven't been tempted.
Okay, okay. That's okay. I mean, I always, when I'm reading thrillers, I always have this one illogical part of my brain telling me that there's a ghost.
Uh-huh.
That makes no sense, but it always keeps telling me that maybe there's a ghost that you can't see in the book, and in the end, it'll all make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as it all makes sense in the end, that's all that matters, really, isn't it? Like, it has to be a satisfying ending.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That does make a lot of sense. And with that, I think we've come to the end of this discussion. But before I let you go, of course, because we're talking about a lot of books and because you write thrillers, I would love to get some amazing thriller recommendations from you. I'm sure you must have read some amazing books yourself. So yeah, please let us know what books you would like to recommend us, and I would make sure that I add it to my 2024 list of thrillers.
Uh-huh. So one I read a few weeks ago is Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. I don't know if you know that one. It came out in the US and the UK in spring, and it's really, really good. It's about a woman who is in her house one night and realizes there's someone in her house, which is sort of, now that I think about it, a bit like Someone in the Attic, but it's a very, very different book to Someone in the Attic. So she has just a split second to decide, does she stand and fight? Does she run? Obviously she doesn't want to freeze. That's not a good solution. And she needs to try to hide her children, and the story unfolds from there. It's really good. So that's Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. I've also just read Paula Hawkins' new book. So Paula Hawkins, who's of course so famous for The Girl on the Train, her new book, The Blue Hour, is coming in October. So that would be one to pre-order. It's not out yet. And that is absolutely brilliant. I loved it. And another one, a third one I loved this year was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. Have you read that one?
No, not yet. I have heard so much
Really
about
good.
it. Yeah.
It's really fun. It's very pacey, action-packed, and it's very clever. I really, really liked it.
Wow, I've heard about night watching as well because it I think appeared on Jimmy Fallon's book club, and
Mm.
yes, so I think I am following him and I saw that book, but it hasn't yet launched in India as well. The
Ah,
last I
okay.
checked, it hasn't, but
Hmm.
really hoping that it launches in India so that I get to pick and read that book too.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this was amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea, for everything. I mean, this was one of the best sessions I've had on thrillers, and I got to learn so much from you. Thank you so much for being here today, for having a heartfelt discussion about No One Saw a Thing, Someone in the Attic, and so many other books of yours. I'm sure that this conversation is going to make people who are listening to us pick No One Saw a Thing. And once someone in the attic launches, I'm sure they're going to pick that as well, because I definitely am waiting for that book to launch in India so that I can go and pick it up from the bookstore. And
You?
yes, and thank you, fellow readers, for tuning into this conversation. If you haven't read No One Saw a Thing yet, please go and get it at a bookstore near you. This book is available in India. And if you are in India, Someone in the Attic will launch super soon. I'm waiting with bated breath and fingers crossed. Till then, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow us on Instagram. I'll add Andrea's Insta handle as well in the description so that you can follow her as well. And if you like this video, do not forget to give us a big fat thumbs up. I'll see you in the next episode.